For the last generation,
I'm BakerMarshall.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations
and I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
All right, welcome back to another edition, Backfire with Franklin Chansey and John Stanberry, and of course myself, Steve Doball Hickson.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, how are you? Glad to be back with you this week. Sorry I missed last week, but had a couple of things needed to take place.
He said you were fishing, is what he said.
Like I said, I had a couple of things that needed to take place. You don't know how close I came to being fishing again today.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm glad to be back. Boy, there's a lot going on. Can anybody tell me what happened in Missouri? Did Trump win Missouri last night?
As of a few minutes ago, with 99.9% of the vote in, he had about a 1,700 vote lead, and Hillary Clinton had about a 1,500 vote lead. So, but they still haven't called it officially.
That's 1,500 votes. Of course, that thing, I mean, it's been close all night in Missouri. I mean, I was looking at the thing, it's just neck and neck.
What has made Missouri so much closer than other states?
Demographics, primarily, I would say. I mean, it's closer to the area where Cruz has performed stronger, and it's he who's in second place there. So.
What is going on going forward? Who do you think Kasich's going to hurt, Cruz or Trump?
That's a really good question, to be honest. He's not naturally a draw against either of them. I don't know.
What's your
I'm
opinion,
really
John?
curious what John thinks about that. That's a great question.
Well, I mean, if he really cared about the country, he would, at this point that he's denied Ohio to Trump, he'd get out.
Unless your goal is to deny Trump having a majority by the time the convention arrives.
Well, I mean, I think if he got out, I think on a head-to-head, I think just like you're seeing in Missouri, if you in all of these states, if you total up the votes that Kasich pulled, if you total up the votes that Rubio pulled, if the bulk of those went to Cruz, Cruz would win all of these. And if we had closed primaries, like those of us who are actually believing conservatives have supported for years, Cruz would be winning all of those because he has won those, where you've had a closed primary. Donald Trump's votes are 29% registered Republican. So 71% of his votes are either independent or registered Democrats.
Do you think GOP's got anything to do with it?
With what?
Only being 29%.
No, the point is in a closed primary, only registered Republicans can vote. And in those states, for example...
Which state was it was Ohio? Ohio is a registered state.
And Trump couldn't win there. Now, Ohio's a purple state, so they've got more moderates and all, and that's why you saw someone like Kasich win in Ohio. But my point is, you know, to be honest, the establishment people in the state of Tennessee, the governor, Senator Alexander, have always argued, because I've fought twice on the state level to go to closed primaries in Tennessee. And their argument has always been, oh, we want to be open and inclusive. We want to welcome everybody in. And our argument back was always, yeah, we want to do that too in the general election, not in the primary. So those same people are now going, oh my gosh, Trump's winning. Well, of course he's winning because you've let non-Republicans, non-conservatives vote in your primary. And what I tell people is, let's say that you're deciding whether you want to build a garage in your yard. You would like for the neighbors to not be upset at the garage, but you don't invite the neighbors to the family meeting to take a vote on whether you build the garage or not. What we're doing with these open primaries is we're allowed. Massachusetts alone had 20,000 registered Democrats cross over this election cycle and vote in the primary. Now, here's the problem. Let's say that those people are really upset with the Democrats, and in November they stay with Trump. That may be a good thing. But the other problem is, let's say they're just messing with us. Let's say they think that Trump is going to be the easier one for Hillary to target, and in November they don't vote for Trump.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I don't think Hillary wants Trump.
Well, I mean, Steve, the polls have not been real good at predicting on this, on Trump. But that's also a polling in the Republican primary. When you get into that general, all the polls indicate he's not going to fare well. Now, I don't know. He's been very deft at denying the odds of the polls this far. But it concerns a lot of us that in the fall he's going to be a pretty easy target on a lot of these issues.
Do you think Jeb Bush hurt Rubio in Florida?
Probably so. I think Rubio hurt Rubio in Florida more than anything.
Rubio, I was so high on him for a while, and I don't know, he just changed.
He got elected as a Tea Party candidate. He went to Washington, and he became sort of a wheeler-dealer. Now, I'll defend him from some of the reality of this. There's a reality of the way Washington works, and you can't always do everything that you've said you're going to do, and you do have to try to figure out how to get along. But there's a lot of resentment out there on both sides, Republican and Democrat, that Washington seems to be more about the game and less about the results.
What do you think about the riot?
The riot? You mean
in
at
Chicago?
The
yeah, Chicago, at the Trump rally.
I think there's a substantial portion of Trump's constituency of those who love that. I think it probably ended up helping him in the primaries.
But you think Trump people liked it?
Some of them, yeah.
What's your opinion, John?
I think people in general are tired of the political correct attitude. Now, I will say, you see the very same thing playing out again. I don't agree with a lot of what Donald Trump has said, and I certainly think that he should be more careful with some of the things he said. But having said that, this stuff has been going on the left side of the spectrum for years now. And the media has never had a problem. They didn't have a real big problem when on college campuses, for example, 3 weeks ago, I forget the guy's name, a conservative speaker was supposed to speak at University of California, San Francisco. They shut him down. And the college wouldn't allow him to come, even though they had allowed all kinds of liberal speakers to come. Then when he went anyway, they literally the protesters blocked the doors to the auditorium and shouted him off the stage.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with people showing up and having a contrary opinion, but in those types of events, I frankly think they should be expressed in a respectful way.
Well, the problem, though, Franklin, I agree with you, but the problem here is the administration. For example, the worst example of this is in the college campuses all across the country. You had Condoleezza Rice, the first black Secretary of State, first black, I think, National Security Advisor first, and then Secretary of State, had to withdraw from giving the commencement address because the pure liberal daisies on campus couldn't stand to have her speak. So the cowardly administrators actually more or less pressured her into withdrawing her acceptance of the speech. That's happened all over the country. You don't see the New York Times writing big exposés about that. You've got, just this past October, the Black Lives Matter people marched in New York City, and they were shouting and carrying signs that said, F the police, murder cops, racism is the disease, revolution is the cure t-shirts. Where was the outrage about that? In the Trump rally, you had protesters disrupting that rally, holding up Bernie Sanders signs. Where was the press asking Bernie Sanders what he's going to do about his supporters disrupting another politician's rallies?
Who is Soros?
Soros is a communist world billionaire who has made his money off of collapsing foreign countries, who is an extreme liberal, one of the main funders of nearly all of the Democrat and leftist organizations in this country.
MoveOn.org, I think, is his deal, isn't it?
A lot of those. He gives billions to these organizations.
I've got something I'm going to play for you guys if you want to put your headsets on. This was on the Hannity show the other night, and it got my attention. So
liberals have been attacking Donald Trump in recent days after left-wing agitators have started disrupting some of his campaign rallies. But what Democrats won't tell you is this: they're the ones who have been using divisive, incendiary language for decades. Just a little reminder.
No, not God bless America. God damn America that's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God America for treating our citizens as less than human.
Pigs in the blanket, fry like bacon.
Folks was in the cave when we had grandpas. We learned to admire them, but they knew to admire us. We built pyramids before Donald Trump ever knew what architecture was.
We will not bow to Tea Party anarchists who refuse to accept the Supreme Court ruled Obamacare to be constitutional.
And then you got their plan, which is let's have dirtier air, dirtier water, less people with health insurance.
They really are kidnapping the U.S. government. It's only about 30 people on the wacko right. Why does he just go at these people?
The Republican health care plan is this. Die quickly. That's right. The Republicans want you to die quickly if you get sick.
We are for cutting spending. We're for reforming our tax code. We're for reforming our entitlements. What we're not for is negotiating with people who have a bomb strapped to their chest.
Damn right Dick Cheney's heart's a political football. We ought to rip it out and kick it around and stuff it back in him.
I need you to go out and talk to your friends and talk to your neighbors. I want you to talk to them whether they're independent or whether they are Republican. I want you to argue with them and get in their face.
And also, remember, back during the 2008 race, then Senator Obama said this about Republicans, quote, they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun. Because from what I understand, folks in Philly, they like a good brawl. And I've seen Eagles fans.
You know, Trump's been catching a lot of criticism over some comments he made. And, you know, the Friday night deal, there was two outbreaks of something that looked like it could be a potential problem. That it always done is seen it, re-seen it, seen it, put it in another concept, another station, another way to look at it, and all they've done is talk about Trump saying whatever he said. The liberals have never taken in, and the Democrats, you know, they can spit it out, but a Republican can't say anything. They can't say anything without it being turned around on them.
Well, I think the criticism I mostly heard had to do with Donald Trump's comments after the protester was being taken out of the
No, they talked about things he said weeks ago, that had incited this and created this environment. And the problem is this environment's been around, Franklin, and the left has tolerated. Now, keep in mind, Bernie Sanders rallies, Hillary Clinton's rallies have been disrupted by these Black Lives Matter people as well. Sure. But you know what? Here's the problem with it. That was a 1 or 2 day story. With Donald Trump, they make it into this narrative that continues and continues and continues, and that's the I'm not a huge Trump supporter, but that's the problem. It's the imbalance in the way the media covers these things.
Is that how Fox was covering it?
Well, I mean, I'll give it. All of them are doing it.
So why would Fox be doing that if they're...
Because the media in general has become sensationalized.
And that I would agree with.
They pick winners
and losers.
That I would
agree with.
But they, you know, when Fox joins in, what it means is you've got 98% of the media doing it instead of 94%
Except that
without
Fox is the largest viewer base.
Well, the majority of Fox's viewers at this point apparently are liberals instead of conservatives.
Well, Trump was sure
going to come as a great surprise.
Hey, Trump was sure giving Fox a hard time the other night. I mean,
he was because he didn't expect to be criticized by them.
Let me give you another example. The Black Lives Matter people have been basically
That's
untouched.
Obama's baby.
That's Obama's baby. He's actually he's bragged about them. I can read you the quotes.
Yeah.
But they basically are based on all of the very rise of them turned out to be a complete fabrication and a lie. And they still periodically chant the hands up, don't shoot, which everybody, even the liberal Eric Holder Justice Department, agreed that that was a false statement, a false story. But here's in
that's their call letters, though.
You had in, let me see if I can see where this actually was. Sorry. St. Paul Public Schools has had a problem with rising violence. So they started using suspension more regularly. Well, then it turns out that more blacks than whites were being suspended. So when that happened, they went to a non-punitive form of discipline. In other words, no punishment. Well, when they had no punishment, they saw a huge spike in their violence. They had teachers that were violently attacked in the classroom. Several of them were sent to the hospital, some seriously. One of them is now suing the school district for failing to provide a safe work environment. So one of the teachers, who is a special education teacher, Theodore Olson, Como Park High School, posted this on his Facebook. Now, this is his statement. Anyone care to explain to me the school-to-prison pipeline my colleagues and I have somehow started or perpetuated or not done enough to interrupt? Because if you can't prove it, and campaigns you've waged to deconstruct adult authority in my building by enabling student misconduct, you seriously owe us real teachers an apology. Actually, an apology won't cut it. Now, that's all he put on there, because he's been accused, the school system is accused of doing this school-to-prison pipeline. The Black Lives Matter local leader was so incensed about this, he decided that they would shut down that high school unless he was disciplined. That teacher has now been removed from the classroom and placed on paid leave to get him out of the classroom, to mollify the Black Lives Matter movement in that area. Now, that's all that teacher said. He said, if you can prove that we're doing something wrong, do it. If not, quit making our classrooms less safe. And he's now being punished instead of applauded for being honest.
There seems to be a lot of this going on everywhere right now. And, you know, Black Lives Matter, to me, should not receive 1 ounce of anybody's attention. It's something that, it's a movement that they've started, but they've used the wrong logo.
Well, think about this. You had Martin O'Malley at a Democrat debate booed because he said all lives matter. When did the idea in our country that all life matters become the wrong thing to say? And that's the group that we're going to hold up against Trump. Now, keep in mind, I think Trump needs to be more careful in some of the things he says. But having said that, he is not to blame for the violence that has been going on on the left side of the spectrum for decades. Most of these people, you look up the word fascism, and what you will find is fascism uses violence to shut down and silence their opponents. That's what this is. And by the way, on CNN, of course, you didn't hear anybody talking a whole lot about this. At one of the anti-Trump rallies, while the reporter was reporting from it, they were holding up a communist flag behind the reporter. So you got Bernie signs being held up, and you got communist flags being held up.
Well, now they're making Trump armbands they're selling at rallies. Franklin, you're off quiet this morning.
I think it's an issue that's going to fall by the wayside.
Black Lives Matter? You think it's going to fall by the wayside?
Well, the real problem, though, Franklin, don't you agree? The real problem, though, is the divisiveness that it stirs. It doesn't ask people to come together and work things out. It asks people to segregate along racial lines and to fight.
I think you can make that argument, John, but the people who make that criticism in many instances have not paid any attention whatsoever to the underlying issues that were driving that. And so it's a little hollow.
You mean like hands up, don't shoot?
It's a little hollow to say that now that somebody managed to get some attention about it, that now they're being divisive.
About what, Franklin?
The fact that there has developed in many communities in the country a totally adversarial relationship between police departments and certain minority communities.
What's that based on?
Well, it's based on a lot of things.
It's based on people agitating, like the president agitates on racial lines.
That's not accurate.
What I'm driving at is the only good thing to come out of the Black Lives Matter is that because they've stirred this up, the Washington Post, probably thinking they were going to support the Black Lives Matter movement, actually did a study of the demographics. They did a year-long study, and here's what they found out. Different American demographics commit crimes at different rates. So after their unprecedented case-by-case study of police shootings, they found that the police use force mainly to protect human life. The use of force against unarmed suspects is rare, and the use of force against black Americans is largely proportional to their share of the violent crime. Police last year fatally shot 965 people in 2015. 264 of those were armed with a gun, 281 were armed with another weapon, and 90 were unarmed. White police officers killing unarmed black men represent less than 4% of fatal police shootings. Police killed very few women this year, but no one argues that the law enforcement is sexist. But because more blacks are killed, even though they commit a higher amount of the crime. In fact, blacks commit homicide at close to 8 times the rates of whites and Hispanics combined. And when you segregate down to males between the age of 14 and to 17, the gap is nearly tenfold.
And that's a wonderful statistic which really tells us nothing about the issue. And the reason it tells us nothing is because nobody would suggest that this is a problem across the board, across the nation. What we would suggest is that there are pockets and places in the country where it's a significant issue.
What's a significant issue, Franklin? What?
Our
point is, if they're committing 8 times the murders, 10 times the murders, it makes sense that they would engage with the police 8 and 10 times more often. Therefore, they will represent a higher number of the people shot by the police. That's just common sense, Franklin.
It's not common sense, John, that we're not only talking about shootings here. That's not the only issue we're talking about. We're talking about numbers of arrests in certain places.
Well, let me ask you a question, Franklin.
John,
between men and women.
Look, John, I don't disagree with the basic idea that you're saying, but I'm going to tell you, if you're going to sit here and tell me that there aren't places in this country,
Post told
they're not looking at individual places.
They looked at individual cases, all of them. They looked at every shooting by police this past year. Every single one.
What about the radical issues we've got going on towards police department? I'm talking about the shootings, the violence that's going on. You know,
statistically speaking, there doesn't any real change.
It's putting the handcuffs on the police.
There has been an increase in attacks and an increase of police deaths. They've been targeted for murder. There have been outright executions of police this past year because of the incendiary rhetoric coming out of this group and the liberal left, and personally out of the White House itself.
I think the White House has done more to create havoc. This president has done more to create problems.
One of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Delray McKesson, he is now running for mayor of Baltimore. He led a seminar at Yale Divinity School, and the title of it was In Defense of Looting, getting straight to the heart of the problem of the police, property, and white supremacy, where they defended looting in the community. Here's the real sick part about that. Who are they looting? Other black people who are doing the right thing. People who have actually put their butts on the line to try and build a business. And what happens? They break the windows out and they rob them blind and run them into the gutter.
What's amazing is the first thing that hit are the liquor stores.
Did you know a police officer is 2.5 times more likely to be killed by a black man than a black man is to be killed by a police officer? The police officer is 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the black man than the black man is by the police officer.
Franklin's awful quiet. I don't know what's going on.
Because I can't respond to these gross generalizations.
That's not that's a statistic, Franklin.
It is, John. All right. There are places in this country where the relationship between African Americans and the police department is practically a war zone. I'm not defending shooting police officers. But to suggest that there's no issue there...
You're missing the point, Franklin. I didn't say there's not an issue there. I'm saying there shouldn't be an issue there. The police are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the black man than the black man is by him, and yet you're right. In these neighborhoods, the racial demagogues led by Al Sharpton, by Black Lives Matter, and quite frankly by our own president, have actually ginned up the feeling.
And in those neighborhoods, what you'll find is that a white person charged with the same offense as the black person gets substantially less punishment for it. It's systemic. The idea that the issue isn't there is the problem. Well, and what I would say to the folks who are making the argument you're making is not that there's no validity in your argument, but where were you when the other side would come up?
Well, let me tell you.
You weren't interested in it at that point.
I'll tell you where I've been. Before Lyndon Johnson and his White House recordings stating that if he could get his program passed, he'd have the N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Feel free to Google that. You can hear the President of the United States actually say that.
That's all fine and good, John, except go ahead and tell the rest of that quote.
Let me finish, Frank.
The part where he said, I've just given the South to the Republican Party.
Well, he may have.
Remember that?
But his intention was to get the blacks on the government plantation, and unfortunately it worked. Because let me give you some statistics, Frank. Before the Great Society was passed by Lyndon Johnson, the black community enjoyed a lower unemployment rate. They enjoyed a lower unplanned pregnancy rate. They enjoyed a higher marriage rate. Harlem was actually...
So did white America.
No, you're not listening to me. The unemployment rate among blacks before the Great Society programs were passed were statistically and regularly lower than the white unemployment rates. It was the Great Society, it was the government plantation, it was liberal progressive policies that have enslaved and destroyed the black family, and they have put these black communities into the ghetto. It's liberal progressive policies that are to blame for all of this.
Black Lives Matter's now saying it's going to shut down the GOP convention.
Well, you've empowered a group of thugs.
What are we supposed to do? What happens if one of them gets shot, or 2 or 3 of them get shot, or
that'll be our fault too.
A policeman, they get in a fight.
They won't be shutting down the convention.
Well, it says they're going to try.
Okay. Happens every convention.
No, it doesn't happen every convention.
Yeah, it does.
It does not.
It does.
Not like this.
Everybody's trying to blame Trump for this violence, but
I don't blame Trump. I think Donald Trump is the natural outcome of all the rhetoric that the Republican Party has spewed for the last 25 years.
We're the rhetoric people.
Yes,
fry them like
exactly
bacon.
What.
Cops are pigs, fry them like bacon, and that's us.
That's exactly what I
So let me get this straight. The Occupy people can occupy public land for months and months and months, and no one does anything to them. But you get some ranchers go into a basically deserted outpost out there, and we go in, invade them, and end up killing one of them. And that's okay.
No one ever said that I've heard say that people who violate the law shouldn't be held accountable.
Well, then why didn't we invade the Occupy people in New York? Why did we let them stay for months and months and months, even after rapes and murders were occurring in their camps? And the police never went in, never confronted them. But you get a bunch of basically peaceful ranchers who take over an outpost in the middle of nowhere.
Who said, "Come get me and I'm going to kill you"?
They didn't do anything. The Occupy people actually were raping and murdering and robbing people.
Okay, John, let's take your argument to its natural conclusion and ask you to take a position. If you say those Occupy people were criminals and thugs and ought to have been rooted out of there, then by God, you mean they should have done it to the ranchers too, don't you?
I do.
Okay, then say
but
that.
Here's my point. I did say that,
You're
Franklin.
The one,
they did it to the ranchers, but they
always
didn't do it to
playing
the others.
people off
no,
against
Franklin,
each other.
You just screwed up because
I didn't.
You're absolutely right.
I
didn't say they shouldn't have stopped the ranchers. What I said was they treated them differently. So you're defending discrimination.
You understand the definition of hypocrisy.
No, you're the hypocrisy one. You're defending white discrimination. You're saying it was okay for them to do it to the white ranchers,
but not the Occupy people. I didn't say a darn word about it. You brought it out.
I said if they did it to the ranchers, they should have done it to the Occupy people.
The problem is that you read TeaPartyCrackpot.com every morning, and you think that's the country.
Well, you know what's funny about that,
Franklin? That's not the country, John. It's a bunch of flakes and nuts who really don't know a darn thing about what's going on in the country.
Because guess what? Glenn Beck, all the crazy things he said, he was proven right. He was proven right about everything he said, Franklin.
Glenn Beck is crackpot number one in my book.
He was proven right about everything he said.
But you know what? In the beauty of this country, he gets to say what he thinks.
Unless
no
a Black Lives Matter person comes up and punches him in the face.
So does Hillary.
That's right.
She gets to say whatever she can think of.
So, Franklin, was it your position that the ranchers were held correct? Were dealt with correctly?
I think the ranchers, first of all, left the area where they were, and that's where they were
so did the
arrested.
Occupy people. Where were you demanding that they do the same to the Occupy people? You want to talk about hypocrisy? Where were you and your leftist buddies when the Occupy people were doing it?
Let's talk about
Did you demand that they that they grab any of the Occupy people that came out?
Some of them were arrested.
Franklin, they were allowed to occupy that space for months and months and months. Rapes were occurring, murders were occurring, robberies were occurring. Nobody went into the area.
Well, there's a couple of differences there that I can see right off the bat.
One group was a liberal group, one group was a conservative group. That's the difference.
No, one part is that nobody was standing there with guns waving at the police saying, "Don't come in."
In the middle of a million-acre area where no one lives around, no one was involved in, no crimes were occurring.
Second of all, we have something called the First Amendment here. Third, we didn't have a federal issue there. We had a state issue, and that's how the state authorities decided
Folks,
to handle
that's what the lift does. That's a lawyer's explanation that's a lawyer's explanation for how they chose to go against the conservative groups and chose not to go against the liberal groups.
That's right. Lawyers deal with facts. Apparently, dentists
You mean facts
deal
like
with
a police
something else.
officer is 2.5 times more likely to be killed by a black man than a black man is by
I didn't disagree with the fact.
Well, that sort of undercuts the whole narrative
No,
of
it
Black Lives
doesn't.
Matter.
No,
Their narrative is that the cops are targeting blacks, Franklin.
What
That's
did
the
I
basis
say?
for their whole
there
argument.
There are places in the country where that narrative would hold true. That doesn't mean the entire country's that way.
All right.
Well, then that means
apparently you're incapable of seeing the distinction.
No, I am capable, and you're right. I'm glad you admit that. So what you're saying is there's a few bad cops every now and there, but most of the police are good, hard-working people.
I absolutely
Well,
would
that's
say
not
that.
what the president says. That's not what
That's
Black
not
Lives
the
Matter
president
says.
hasn't said exactly that, as a matter of fact.
All right. Both of you go stand in the corner. Time out. Take a time out. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash.
The cash you need today is waiting for you at Check Into Cash. It's your money, so come in and get it.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check Into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
The cash you need is right here, so stop worrying and stop in to Check Into Cash today.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center, or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
Train Endurance Engineers are an elite group of extremely devoted individuals who stop at nothing to push our heating and cooling units to the brink. That way, when they pick up the pieces, they'll know exactly how to make the Train we install in your home even more reliable. Right now, their target is a Train AC unit.
Test to control. Fire up the pitching machine.
Their methods may seem unconventional,
Okay, cue the jackhammers.
but it's because of their tireless efforts that it's hard to stop a Train.
When you want an unconventionally efficient heating and air unit that keeps your home right in the comfort zone day in and day out, nothing will do but a Train. To get the best Train service, call your local Train comfort specialist. Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. Keeping you comfortable is Mechanical Systems' only business, and they've been providing high-quality service and installations for more than 30 years. Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. That's 336-5739.
It's hard to stop a Train. Really hard.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
Every Saturday. That's right. Every Saturday.
from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
I think Hillary really screwed up bad the other day. And
which quote are you talking about? 'Cause she screwed up 2 or 3 times.
Well, she really screwed up saying that there was no lives lost in Libya.
What she said was not a single. We didn't lose a single person in Libya.
Well, she was referring to soldiers going in.
Actually, that's not true. I'll give you the full context. She was not.
Okay.
She was discussing the aftermath and the North African nation's slow, difficult trudge towards a functioning democracy. She was talking about the whole thing, the whole country, and she said we didn't lose a single person in
How
Libya.
can the Secretary of State make a comment like that? Or
Again, I understand what you're saying, but that's not the substance of what she was talking about. She was talking about the policy in Libya and the decision about, because there were a lot of people advocating that we send troops in to stabilize things there. That's what she was discussing.
But, I mean,
and she's correct about that. We didn't send troops in, and so we were not losing troops there. You could argue whether you think that's a good idea or a bad idea, but that's what she was talking about.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you were the parents or the family of the 4 men that died in the Benghazi attack, how would you feel about that?
I understand exactly what you're saying there, John, but at the same time, you talk about the media's responsibility. That's an example where context matters when you're talking about
Franklin, you could go back, folks, I'll put it this way. I'm perfectly confident to tell you to pull up the video sound clip and listen to her. She was not referring to any small slice of it. She was referring to the entire operation in Libya. And she simply omitted the fact that we lost 4 brave Americans because of her failed leadership. They had multiple requests for increased security, which were denied. They were scandalously underprotected. There were warning signs about an attack, which we ignored. And then it went on for over 8 hours, and no help came.
Did she say Americans, or how was it?
Lives. She said, this is a direct quote, we didn't lose a single person in Libya.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is wrong. That's a wrong statement.
Yeah, if you're
person.
Okay. Nonetheless, the subject that they were talking about was the strategy that was being followed in Libya, which was whether or not we should intervene militarily. That was the subject matter of it.
I don't think we'll ever know the way it turned out.
Well, I guess that's true, but it's still open for debate.
By the way, her callousness is not related just to Americans who were killed because of her poor leadership qualities. She was asked, now this, I'm going to give you the actual question. She was asked, Make the case to poor whites who vote Republican why they should vote for you and your economic policies. First words out of her mouth was, we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business.
Yeah, that was another screw up.
Now, even the president's advisor, David Axelrod, said, awkward opening line to the answer. So folks, if you live, by the way, Pennsylvania is the 4th largest coal-producing state. Ohio is the 11th. Virginia is the 15th. If you live in those states and you work for a coal mine or you work for a company associated with a coal mine, just remember, we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business.
In the same breath, she talks about how she's going to give everybody else jobs. All these other people are going to get jobs.
Well, that's what liberal progressives do. They pick winners and losers in the economy.
How can she talk about giving jobs when she's been in there 8 years? Her and Obama haven't done anything. What has she done? Tell me what she done.
The unemployment rate has fallen below 5% here.
Yeah, and the underemployment rate
that's fallen too.
That fell last month.
It's falling
last month. This is the slowest, longest recovery in the history of the country.
It's also the most prolonged recovery.
Because it's the slowest and longest. Boy, that's a lawyerly way to put it.
No, it's not. It's not.
I got one more question before y'all get off on this. Whatever happened to Bergdahl? Are we going to know anything about his trial or anything?
Scheduled, do you? That's a military issue. That's not.
It's not going to happen after the election.
Do you
think
I'm sure this Justice Department will put it off as long as they can.
It's not the Justice Department. That's the military.
Right, because they don't all communicate through the White House.
Yes, generals in the military take their instructions from the Justice Department.
No, the point is, Franklin,
why would you say that,
because this is the most politicized administration we've seen since Nixon. And they have weaponized the government. And so this Bergdahl case is not something the president wants to come up, and it won't come up. He tried to get it actually not to go to trial through his review of one lieutenant colonel, and fortunately we did have a judge in the military system that said no, this is going to trial. Okay. Not going to do what the one guy recommended.
Okay. I want to know, Franklin, answer this question for me. How do you go to college and not borrow a dime?
Well, lots of people do that. I wasn't one of them, but a lot of people do.
Well, help me how?
Well, first of all,
pay cash.
That's one possibility. Okay. Another is
Hillary in her speech.
You probably get some Pell Grants and that sort of thing.
Well, in Hillary's speech of how she's going to create all these jobs and all this stuff, in the same breath, she comes back and she said, I want people to go to college and not have to pay a dime.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going to happen?
Well, it's the same way we're trying to do junior colleges here in Tennessee. We're trying to offer that to students because we think the argument, good or bad, you can decide for yourself. The argument is that an educated public is a more productive public.
Yeah, because more degrees in women's study, any degree with the word studies on the end of it is probably a draw off of the productive society and not a production.
Well, even if you get a degree in women's studies, you've probably still taken some math courses. You've still had some English courses.
But you're not qualified to do anything but cheat other women into women's studies degrees.
Okay.
Well, I think the problem with school, the cost of school is run up because a lot of people are wasting a lot of time taking a bunch of classes.
Actually, what she's doing amounts to throwing gasoline on a fire. Because the reason you've seen tuition increase the way it has is because there's been too much government money put to education. I've said this before. You had schools that had to be careful with their resources, so they picked the areas of expertise that they were going to try to excel in. And so if you wanted a degree in engineering, you were going to try to go to Tennessee Tech, or you were going to try to go to Georgia Tech. You were going to go to a school that had chosen to do that.
I think that's a perfectly valid
But when the government piled all this money out here and said, you can have this.
Too much money.
The schools then start competing for that pile of money, and they start over-aggressively building. And the point, I said this, you had I think it was the Unum Providence CEO down down in Chattanooga at a roundtable discussion with the schools. They were about to break up. Everybody's leaving, and this was said. I just want to ask a question of the college presidents. How many sports management jobs do you think there actually are in Chattanooga, Tennessee? And there was dead silence in the room. And the statement was made, if you will send me people with degrees and things I can actually use, I will hire them. But we've put so much money out there that kids can get degrees in basically worthless things from the standpoint of being a productive member of society. Now, I know I pick on women's studies. There's nothing wrong with women's studies. When it was a small subset of a few experts around the world who concentrated on that because they had a particular calling for it and they wanted some research done to kind of explore that. But when you're giving thousands of women's studies degrees a year, there's no job in that. It's a waste of our money.
Right.
And it's a waste of a young person's life.
But they feel like they've got to study that for some reason.
Well, we've got literature courses on Star Wars.
Yeah.
We've got sex courses being taught on sadomasochism on college campuses.
Is it just so they can get the money?
No, it's because you've turned them loose. You've required no accountability whatsoever. You've not required them to actually be a productive force in our culture. And so you've allowed this kind of lazy thinking that I should be able to do whatever I want and someone else ought to pay for it.
John, I'm going to change the subject, and I'm going to put this as gently as I can, and it's going to be directed probably towards you. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to say I feel betrayed by the GOP right now.
Well, I don't disagree with you.
Why should I feel that way? I mean, why is the GOP carrying on the way they are?
Well, look, part of the problem is the culture. We are, for example, Social Security. If we don't do something to Social Security, it won't be there for any of us. That's just a fact. Okay. And behind closed doors, the Democrats will admit to that. But we, as a culture, as a country,
we've been talking about this for years.
But here's the problem, Steve. As soon as someone actually does try to do it, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, we as a culture turn on them. We immediately say, well, I don't like that. I want my cake and don't want to eat it. You know, so the problem is us. We're an indulgent, spoiled culture that wants to hear what we want to hear, and so we will vote for any demagogue that tells us what we want to hear, that tells us the easy way out.
So are you saying Romney is spoiled?
No, not necessarily. What I'm telling you is that Republicans have tried for years to enforce some fiscal discipline. And there are Democrats that are worried about this too, don't get me wrong. But as soon as they do, they suffer at the ballot box because the public is spoiled. The public would rather continue down this road with the idea that everything will be okay, and it won't.
Don't you think that the people need to make this decision? And
they are making the decision. Well, they're voting for people that tell them what they want to hear.
Well, the GOP is really trying to sway the Republican side. I'm telling you, they're working hard trying to sway it the way they want it.
Well, Steve, what I'm telling you is over the years, the thing that has engendered a lot of this anger in the community towards the GOP is because we haven't gotten results. Well, one of the reasons we don't get results is because that when you do, the public doesn't stay with you.
Well, you know, we needed the legislator. Like GOP won the legislation, right? They won the Senate. Later on, they said nothing could get done, needed the Senate, got the Senate, nothing got done. You know, now we can't let the people decide. You know, the GOP is going to get in there and try to push Trump out.
As far as the Senate is concerned, the Democrats did a good job of changing the rules. And right now, if you don't have 60 people in the Senate, there's not a lot the Senate can do.
Okay. But, you know, I know that you don't trust Trump. I've been for Trump from day one, and I've pushed Trump. You don't trust Trump. You think he's a Democrat running as a Republican.
I think he's an egotistical, self-absorbed man that basically says whatever he has to say in the moment to get what he wants.
Do you think the GOP should be trying to sway the election?
Well, I will tell you that Donald Trump met for 2 hours with Bill Clinton in Bill Clinton's office a week and a half before he announced his run for the Republican presidency. I have a real problem with that. I'm not sure that this wasn't an arranged deal from the get-go. Now, I think there's a good possibility that the plan was just Trump disrupts the Republican Party. I think his ego, he got in there and said, hey, I could actually do this. And my problem is, I don't think any of us have any idea how he will actually govern.
Do you think it's going to be worse than we've had?
Well, that is actually an argument in his favor. I don't know that it could be worse. So here's my problem, though. I personally think that I ran as a delegate for Carly Fiorina. I think a Fiorina president, I think a Cruz president, I think a Rubio president would have been much more predictable as far as a conservative movement.
You like Ben Carson?
I liked Ben. I don't think he was really prepared.
I loved his lukewarm endorsement yesterday.
Actually, Ben's
where he
good.
said, if Trump's a disaster, it will only last 4 years.
That's exactly right. I mean,
but think about that. Everybody trumpeted the endorsement, and then his endorsement was, well, it's only 4 years.
It's only 4 years.
Well, no, the reason he's saying that, he's trying to sway the damn GOP, John. He's trying to tell them, get off his butt, and let the people
let me tell you
the people.
But you know what, Steve?
Let me tell you something. And this is, I'm not saying this as a critical way, but one of the problems that the Democratic Party has had when they're governing and they're in power is their inability to take the different factions of their party and get them on the same page. And that has presented a problem for them.
I think right now
that's exactly the problem the Republican Party is contending with.
Here's what we
got.
But
they really haven't had to deal with it.
And we've got the Democrats. That's their problem.
All right, Steve,
now then we've got the Tea Party and we've got the Republicans. That's our problem.
Well,
I agree.
Actually,
that's what I'm saying.
A lot of the Tea Party are not for Trump because they've looked at his record. Let me ask you a question, Steve. When you talk about why haven't the Republicans done anything, there's been one guy in Washington that has actually tried to do it and has actually done the very things that you're talking about.
What?
His name's Ted Cruz. He's the one who shut down the government. He's the one that called Mitch McConnell a liar on the Senate floor. So wait a minute.
Well,
you just said what you wanted.
No.
You got one guy who has a proven track record of actually doing it.
He has not
you got
done
another
a thing.
guy that's
all he's done is called chaos.
Why has he accomplished? Now see, that's my point. Actually, Steve, perfect.
Now
wait a minute. Perfect, Steve.
Wait a minute.
That is actually perfect. Your response is absolutely perfect because you know what? You just proved what I said. What? You got a guy that went to Washington, actually did what the Tea Party, the people that are angry at Washington wanted to do.
I'm telling you, the Tea Party's too far right, John. That's what I'm telling you.
There's and this is just a fact.
You've got
for many years, the Republican Party had it easy in that sense. That it was just easy to say, government's the problem.
Government is the problem.
But then you find out, as is Steve, not that he's liberal or anything like that, but there's a big chunk of the Republican Party who think shutting down the government's stupid. You fix the problem. You don't get rid of it completely.
I think when you can't accomplish one thing, something's wrong. And we have been there, and we've tried it,
the problem
and nothing's working.
Steve, the problem is, for example, shutting down the government. Ted Cruz got credit for that. The president shut the government down. There were compromises sent to him. Matter of fact, for example, Marco Rubio, when he first got in, put forward an immigration plan that probably would have worked and was actually more conservative than the Gang of Eight plan. And the president politically went out the week before he did it and purposely torpedoed the plan. But yet the president doesn't get any of that blame. Apparently the Republicans are all to blame.
The president we've got now is too far to the left. Okay? He's too far to the left. We've got people too far to the right. They've got people too far to the left. We've got to try to come together.
Ted Cruz's positions and his conservative positions, and people like me, my conservative positions, haven't changed for 40 years. We're not too far to the right. It's that to be honest, you and people in the community have allowed the narrative to shift the midline so far to the left. I mean, think about this, Steve. We got a guy waving a communist flag in the background of a rally, and no one's bothered by that anymore. Communism murdered 100 million people last century, and no one's bothered that all of Bernie Sanders people are proud to call themselves socialists. And you're telling me I'm too far to the right?
John, it's just like Trump made a comment, get him out of here, get him out of here. In the old days, somebody had punched him out. And then catch the rhetoric he's caught over that from the GOP side also.
Well, the problem
is
4 years ago, he said Romney was too harsh on immigration. He said that the problem is he is telling people, but he is manipulating people right and left. And my problem is, at least with Hillary, I don't want Hillary at all, but I could tell you probably what she's going to do. I have no idea what Trump's going to do.
You know what? That's pretty... to me, that's okay right now because I think he'll get some things done.
Well, I hope you like what's going to happen.
I think if you'll listen to him and really listen to him, you'll understand.
Well, I do listen to him, Franklin. Steve, I do listen to him. Here's my problem. I listen to him all the time. I listen to him when he says the Better Business Bureau faxes him a report that he's got an A rating.
What about when he talks about the waste we have in this country?
Well,
he wants to clean that up.
Well, first off, you can do away with all of that, and it won't. Here's the problem. Listen. Conservatives have said this for decades now. You can do away with all of the entire discretionary part of the budget, which is not just the fraud, waste, and abuse, all the discretionary spending, and you still will have a huge deficit. It's the entitlements. And every time we've talked about the entitlements, the liberal progressives have labeled us as wanting to throw Granny off a cliff, and unfortunately, the public buys into it. And what I'm telling you is the public does not pay attention. They don't study the issues enough. You've got people that they don't even know what the Supreme Court is, but they know all the damn judges on American Idol or on The Voice. They'll watch The Voice every single night that it's on, but they won't pay attention to a Supreme Court case that will actually affect their lives and their children's lives. That's the problem.
Have you seen all these judge shows that are on television now? They've got a judge show on during the day on every network.
And you know what? People will watch that. But if you put a show on discussing for 30 minutes the cases before the Supreme Court, the ratings will fall through the floor because we are a spoiled population that doesn't care what's happening.
Well, I just wanted to say, John, I really do feel betrayed by the GOP and the way they've acted. They've embarrassed me lately.
I just told you that I don't disagree with the betrayal, but you're being manipulated through that betrayal.
I'm being manipulated.
I don't think you're going to like.
No, I'm being manipulated from the GOP right now. I like what I'm seeing.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it. I'm a Republican. Okay? I plan on voting Republican.
No, not this time. If you end up voting for Trump, we're not really voting
Is
Republican.
Trump running under the Republican
side
name? Okay.
Yeah,
Can we not respect that? Can we not respect that, John?
Well, you know what? I'll go out on a limb. No, I don't respect that. When you funded Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, guess what? Ask me how much money I've given to a Democrat ever in my life, Steve. Not a dime. Not a single dime.
What were you doing in business?
I was working, trying to keep my taxes down.
But you weren't trying to develop. You weren't trying to do things where you have to give money to both sides.
Actually, you don't have to.
Yeah, you do.
No, you don't have to.
If you want
to
negotiate a deal, sometimes you do. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say
that's
about
part of the problem.
GOP.
Actually, you're right.
Ted Cruz can go up there and stand at attention and argue for a month. I don't care, but he didn't accomplish one darn thing. Nothing.
Well, actually, he did accomplish a lot.
What did he accomplish?
He took a stand, Steve. We used to take a stand in this country.
What came out of it?
Well, the Democrats won. You're right. Okay. But we took a stand.
All right. Then we didn't win anything. It didn't help us one bit.
Well, a lot of us have
Hey, Franklin, join in anytime.
things we don't find negotiable.
I think there are things that
I'm talking, I feel like I'm turning on the GOP right now.
You are.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm going to vote Republican.
What if
John,
I said
I am going to vote Republican. Now, are you still going to vote Republican?
I will. Yeah,
okay.
I will.
All right. I just want to make sure.
But in a primary,
I think you could make a pretty good case that Cruz is on one end of the electorate in the country, and Bernie Sanders is on the other end of the electorate in the country.
And Trump's closer to Bernie Sanders than he is Cruz.
No, he's right down the middle.
Look at his position,
well, hold on.
Steve.
And that 50 to 60% of the country is somewhere more toward the middle than those two extremes are. I think that would be an honest statement. So,
yeah, but let me
anybody who wants to get anything done has to take that fact into account.
The way it was is not working.
Well, let me kind of modify and I don't disagree with what Franklin said, but here's the problem with it. You can always loosen something up. It's very hard to tighten it back up. So if you err on the side of conservatism, the natural direction for things is to moderate back towards the middle. If you err on the side of liberalism, the natural tendency is to be more liberal. You can't, people don't like you to constrict them. They'll let you loosen them up a little bit. So if you're a little too tight, if you're a parent, how do you err? You err on the side of a little more discipline rather than a little less discipline.
Here's the facts. If Bernie Sanders says, I'm going to do all these liberal things, and Ted Cruz says, I'm going to do all these conservative things, the fact is, neither one of them are going to be able to get a fraction of that done.
That's exactly right.
That is true. And that's a substantial part, though, of where all the cynicism has arisen, because the media on both sides tends to focus on those extremists, and they get a lot of attention.
Ted Cruz is not an extremist.
Oh, he isn't.
He is not an extremist.
John, if you don't bring a few Democrats over, you'll never win another election.
Well, you know what? That might be true, because the big result of us becoming a spoiled nation is that we're losing the nation. People used to understand hardship. They used to understand how to not compromise their ideals.
We got a caller. Let's take a caller. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Steve?
Yeah.
I want to ask John and Franklin both a question.
All right.
Ted Cruz and Donald Trump both say that they're going to abolish the IRS. Is this true or not? John, go first.
All right. Thanks for your question.
Well, yeah, Cruz wants to go to a flat tax, which would effectively, your tax return would be on a postcard-size thing. You'd list how much you made, you'd pay a flat tax, and that'd be the end of it. And there's no reason to have an IRS, at least not an IRS like we have now.
Who's going to oversee Obamacare?
Well, Ted Cruz said the first thing he'd do is abolish Obamacare.
The question is there any realistic chance that he could accomplish that?
Actually, there is.
I doubt that.
Look,
if for no other reason, I'll give you the cynical answer. If, like in the Tennessee Journal Assembly yesterday, when the bill to allow the expansion of the broadband capabilities from other things went down yesterday because of what? All the pressure from the lobbyists in the case.
Well, some of us don't want government involved in that.
Whether that's true or false, John, it was tremendously popular with the public.
It may be. That's my point.
Hold on.
The public. Popular doesn't mean right.
For the bill. That's not what I'm doing.
Popular doesn't mean right.
That's not what I said, John. The point is, it was the pressure from all the lobbying that made the difference in that. That's exactly how it would go with the attempt to abolish the IRS. That's just how it'd be.
Well, I disagree. I think it's very doable. I think it almost has to be done.
No, he can't accomplish that.
Well, I think he can.
Neither one of them could.
Well, let me leave you with one thing. And, Steve, you do this for me. Right. Go back to the political campaign in 1979. Read all of the things that were said about Ronald Reagan, and you will find they mirror almost exactly the things being said about Ted Cruz right now. They called Ronald Reagan the same things. He was an extremist. He was going to cause World War III. He was going to destroy the economy. The rich were going to get richer. The poor were going to get poorer. And his presidency was probably one of the greatest presidencies of the 20th century.
I loved him. You're right.
Well, go look at what they said about him.
All right, folks, I guess we better wind it up. We're running late today. We'll see you next week for another edition of Backfire.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve